Hello everyone, my name is Gabriel Brown, I'm a Senior Analyst with Heavy Reading. I'm here with Steve Gleave, he's Senior Vice President of Marketing at Metaswitch. Good to see you, Steve. We're here at Mobile World Congress. I see you have the tagline, Constructive Disruption. I really like the sound of that, but what does that mean in a Metaswitch, in a telecom industry sense?
Oh, yeah, great question. It's probably something you've been doing at Light Reading for many years now. We like to sort of define it as kind of productively challenging, if you like, conventional wisdom. So it's really, when it comes to technology, about replacing what people have got with what they could actually imagine having. So, we find that in the industry there's a little bit of sort of rigidness, if you like, in some of the supplier relationships, where people are getting the same things from the same vendors, and it's really time to challenge that. It's time to challenge the relationships, it's time to challenge the technology. Just because a vendor tells you that they can't do it, it doesn't mean that it can't be done. Mm-hmm. And that in today's market, we think that both operators and vendors, they've got to be, to survive, you've got to be nimble, you've got to be agile, you've got to be more cost efficient. And I think this drives a change in everything, kind of like forget the old and really start thinking about new models, not just for your network, but also for your business relationships, your commercial relationships, how everything goes together. So constructive disruption says, let's look at this again and let's see where there are real pockets to challenge what's being done conventionally with things that are very much now a reality.
Yeah, I think I fully agree. There's an opportunity to come in and disrupt it. It's, but where are the sort of specifically, you talk about pockets, what's some specific examples of where you can do that?
Yeah, I normally break it down into 3 or 4 categories. So clearly there's a technology, sort of disruptive innovation in technology, and mostly in this market right now it's a lot to do with what's called virtual network functions or VNFs, and I think it's easy to say, well, we've got some software that used to run on hardware, we'll just port that into the cloud, and that doesn't typically end well. So the disruption here is actually writing software, virtual network functions, natively for the cloud. So this is software that basically has a microservices architecture, it scales linearly in the cloud, it doesn't require any specific hardware other than just the standard COTS hardware that's there. And you create carrier-grade resiliency basically in the way you write and scale and heal your software. Mm-hmm. The software is written for easy orchestration, and basically when you take that level, that approach to creating virtual functions, you end up with a opportunity to do things in the cloud that you could never do just on old hardware or just by porting in software that was built tightly coupled, or written, I should say, to be tightly coupled with underlying hardware. So there's definitely a technology piece to it. And then there's kind of the 3 other areas that we say, well, obviously there's a disruption in the way you can build a network. It's easy to sort of say, well, go from bricks to clicks, but there are things you can do once you start instantiating software rather than building sort of network solutions. You can virtualize many parts of your network. You could virtualize your point of presence, for example. These things that you literally had to build out can now be virtualized in either a private cloud or indeed in a public cloud. Mm-hmm. You can disrupt your business models. Mm-hmm. Again, virtualization really changes the way you might do things like an MVNO, where typically you'd have to build in some pretty clever virtual sort of multi-tenant solutions, I should say. With virtualization, you can just spin up virtual machines on a per operator basis. You could scale out resources to handle RCS, things that are higher on the signaling demands, but you could scale them out more elegantly. You could even outsource that effectively as a business. So,
yeah.
There are lots of areas there that disrupt, and I guess ultimately, particularly important to us, is you disrupt the relationship between the operator and the supplier in terms of, well, now we're talking about open source software, we're talking about paying as you go, subscriptions, usage, the model of just give us a big load of money up front and we'll ship you some hardware and you're on your own. Those models are changing too to something that's very much as a let's kind of pay as we go environment. So disrupting everything.
Okay, very good. I think the Metaswitch CTO has been one of the most important voices in the industry, mm-hmm. Certainly on the sort of design for cloud,
right?
Punching kind of well above your weight in terms of size of the company.
Thank you.
But very influential. Take that through to business side is very good. If we take a market like VoLTE, however, that's kind of, are there opportunities that's already sort of somewhat established? Some operators have made good progress with it, not all, but it's coming now. Is that somewhere where you have an in still, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great example of where it's kind of easy to say, I need VoLTE, I'll go to my existing mobile vendor, maybe they'll throw it in and I'll get a basic MMTEL server and we'll be good to go. But I think there's real opportunities that are being missed in doing that. In fact, with a lot of our discussions with operators around the world, there's kind of three things that they sort of come back to and go, are we overlooking these, and maybe we need to consider this as part of a VoLTE strategy. One is absolutely this, just generally going with virtualization versus non-virtual. There's this kind of feeling of, we're ready to embrace NFV, but is NFV ready to be embraced? And when you talk to a company like Metaswitch, you find out that we've virtualized all the parts of our portfolio, from IMS cores to SBCs to TASs, and it's very realistic now to virtualize a complete VoLTE solution. And it's a way of kind of getting your hands dirty with virtualization in an area that's actually very high performing, and people have discovered quite quickly that this can alleviate a lot of the delays and some of the problems that are out there with bringing VoLTE to market.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing. The other things that we're finding is, some people, when they look at VoLTE, they go, well, what about all these other services I had on my voice network today? I've done some 3G camel integration, I got some some closed user groups, I got some coloring back tones, I got these sort of secretarial answering services, I got staff temporary numbers that I want to bring forward. And how do I bring that forward into VoLTE? Have I got to sort of re-engineer it separately, or can I actually use technology to allow me to use those existing services, but on top now of a sort of an LTE infrastructure? So we think that's important. And then it's really the third part is like, well, what when we get there? Is this just a business case just to take voice from one network and put it on another? Or can we extend it? Can we have SDKs where we can create new services on top of that? And obviously the promise really of kind of network functions in general is this ability to chain multiple application servers together to effectively create new services on sort of local, national, global basis. And so we're bringing it in and we're saying, look, virtual solutions, no services left behind, and an extensible environment for creating new stuff. And it's that kind of disruption that is making people stop and think a bit.
Yeah, I was with an operator just this morning, one of the big Euro groups, just launched VoLTE in a couple of countries, but he's got that exact issue. Is, well, I've got all these enterprise services.
Yeah.
They're making me a lot of money. How do I bring them on?
So you should have brought him with you.
Yeah. All right, next time. And the other thing we see, quite a few countries now, there's an operator or two have launched VoLTE service, but as yet they're not really connected together. What's going on there?
Definitely a lot more interest in what's called IPX, so IP level interconnect. You're absolutely right. You need the network effect in order to join networks. Again, we're seeing, it's interesting, like 4 years ago, we were at the show and we launched the world's first virtual SBC at the time. I mean, 4 years ago, this was before the operators even put out their NFV kind of mandate. And ever since then, we've been deploying. We're deployed in, I think it's over 10 of the world's tier 1 operators now with a virtualized session border controller platform. So it scales the media separately, it scales the signaling separately. It's very high performance, it's optimized for packet performance in the cloud. It basically does its transcoding on DSPs in the cloud. So everything about this is designed for high performance in a virtualized environment, and we're seeing that is a very cost-effective way of carriers being able to, interconnect literally, sort of as demand is required, and potentially, of course, with actually no sort of physical location in which to do it. So it's exciting times there.
Yeah, good stuff. I guess just to close out, I've spent a bit of time around the show. I've seen Metaswitch on at least half a dozen kind of partner booths. People are paying for this space by the square foot. How did you pull that one off?
No, it was actually based on our technology. No surprise. It does all come back to the virtual network functions, really. I think we're at this sort of point in the industry where people are either developing virtual network functions or NFVI for the infrastructure or the MANO layer. And for companies that are in an NFVI space or in the MANO space, when they go out and look for VNFs, and they quickly see that Metaswitch has the ones that, you know, that are hardware agnostic, that scale linearly, that are N plus K from a redundancy perspective. You know, don't need sort of specialized application DNS load balancers, just use regular, I should say regular DNS load balancers. And so it tends to be that they come to Metaswitch. We have VNFs that are open source. Our Clearwater VIMS core has been open source since the day we first introduced it. And that's allowed us to really gain a great presence with, you know, HPE and IBM and Intel and VMware and Canonical and Brocade and Tata. And all of these guys, so it's a good show for us from that perspective.
Great, that open source thing was a big move a year or two back.
Yeah.
Thanks
Fortune
very much, Steve.
favours the brave, right?
Thanks very much.
Yeah, pleasure, Greg. Good to see you.
Cheers.
Thank you.